Picture a quiet village where Miss Jane Marple, a sharp-eyed old lady, gets a chilling letter. A young man, Edward, has vanished from eerie Harrow Manor. Dark secrets unravel, cursed ruby amulets, hidden rooms, and a smuggling ring led by a charming liar, Giles. With whispers of betrayal and danger, Miss Marple sets a clever trap, risking everything to save Edward and expose the truth. In 10 thrilling chapters, follow her as she faces her darkest case, proving no mystery is too deep for her quiet brilliance. Will she outsmart the shadows? Dive in to find out. Chapter 1. The letter. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cozy parlor in St. Mary Mead, a quiet village where everyone knew each other's business. The morning sun slipped through lace curtains, painting soft patterns on the wooden floor. Her knitting. Needles clicked gently, shaping a pale pink shawl. She liked these peaceful moments, tea steaming in a china cup, birds chirping outside, and the world feeling safe. But today, something felt off, like a shadow passing over the sun. The postman's knock broke her thoughts. Miss Marple set her knitting aside and shuffled to the door, her slippers whispering on the rug. The postman, young Tommy with his cheerful grin, handed her a small stack of letters. "Morning, Miss Marple. Got a fancy one today," he said, tipping his cap. She smiled, thanked him, and closed the door, her eyes already scanning the envelopes. Most were ordinary bills. A note from her nephew Raymond, a gardening catalogue. But one stood out. It was heavy, the paper thick and creamy, with a black border around the edges. Miss Marple's heart gave a little jump. Black-edged letters often meant bad news, like a death or trouble. She turned it over. The handwriting was elegant, familiar, addressed to Miss Jane Marple, St. Mary Mead. The return address read, Harrow Manor, Greystone. She knew that name. Lady Beatrice Harrow, an old friend from years ago, lived there. They'd met at a charity tea in London, bonding over their love of roses and sharp observations about people. Beatrice was kind but firm, a woman who ran her grand estate with a steady hand. They hadn't spoken in ages, not since Beatrice's husband passed. Why right now? And why the black border? Miss Marple returned to her chair, the letter heavy in her hands. She slid it open with a silver letter opener, careful not to tear the paper. Inside was a single sheet written in Beatrice's neat script. The words pulled her in like a hook. "My dear Jane, I hope this finds you well. I hesitate to trouble you, but I am in great need of your wisdom. Something dark stirs at Harrow Manor. My grandson Edward has vanished. The police call it a young man's folly, but I fear worse, something sinister. I cannot say more on paper. Please come at once. Your keen mind is my only hope. Yours in trust, Beatrice Harrow." Miss Marple read it twice. Her lips pressed tight, vanished. Sinister, those words hung heavy, like storm clouds over the village green. She leaned back, her mind already turning. Edward, she remembered him vaguely, a lively boy with bright eyes, visiting St. Mary Mead one summer with Beatrice. He'd be grown now, maybe 20 or so. Why would he disappear? And why did Beatrice suspect foul play? She folded the letter and tapped it against her palm. St. Mary Mead was peaceful. Its troubles, small petty thefts, gossip, the occasional lost cat. But Beatrice's world was different. Harrow Manor was grand, old, full of secrets. Miss Marple had heard whispers about the Harrow family over the years, tales of wealth, tragedy, and strange happenings. A missing grandson wasn't just a family matter. It could be something deeper, darker. Her eyes drifted to the mantel, where a small clock ticked steadily. It was just past 10. She caught the noon train. She could be at Greystone by evening. The idea of leaving her quiet home made her pause. She was no young adventurer, dashing off to solve mysteries. Her knees ached in the damp, and she liked her routine tea at 4, knitting by the fire, chats with neighbors. But Beatrice's plea tugged at her. A friend in trouble couldn't be ignored. And if she was honest, a spark of curiosity flickered inside her. She'd always had a knack for noticing things others missed, the glance that lingered too long, the story that didn't add up. This was a puzzle, and puzzles called to her. She stood, smoothing her skirt, and moved to the kitchen. Mrs. Baxter, her housekeeper, was kneading dough, flour dusting her apron. "I'll be away for a bit," Miss Marple said, keeping her voice light. "A friend needs me. Could you pack a small case? It's just a few things. My gray dress, the blue cardigan, and my good hat." Mrs. Baxter raised an eyebrow, but didn't pry. "Right away, miss." "How long you gone for?" "Not sure," Miss Marple said. "A few days, maybe more." She didn't mention the letter or the vanished boy. Mrs. Baxter loved gossip, and the village would be buzzing by supper if she let slip even a hint. Back in the parlor, Miss Marple sipped her tea, now cold, and thought. Edward's disappearance could be simpler. Young man running off to the city, chasing dreams, or dodging trouble. Boys did that sometimes, but Beatrice wasn't one to panic. She feared something sinister. There was reason behind it. Miss Marple's mind spun through possibilities. A family quarrel, money troubles, or something tied to those old hero stories, curses, feuds, hidden treasures. She shook her head. No use guessing without facts. She'd learn more at the manor. She glanced at her knitting, the pink shawl half finished. It would have to wait. She tucked it into a basket, then wrote a quick note to Raymond saying she'd be visiting a friend. No need to worry him. By 11, her suitcase was ready, a small, sturdy case with her initials, J.M., stamped on the side. Mrs. Baxter had packed efficiently, even slipping in a tin of homemade biscuits for the journey. Miss Marple smiled. Small kindnesses made the world brighter. She changed into her travel clothes and neat gray dress, a wool coat, and her best hat, a sensible one with a single feather. The mirror showed a slight elderly woman with sharp blue eyes and a quiet strength. She didn't look like someone who solved mysteries, and that suited her fine. People underestimated her, and that was their mistake at the station. The noon train was on time, its whistle sharp in the crisp air. Miss Marple bought a ticket to Greystone, a small town about 2 hours away. The platform was busy, farmers with crates, a mother scolding her children, a young couple whispering. She boarded the train and found a window seat. The carriage smelled of polish and coal, and the seats were hard but clean. As the train chugged out of St. Mary Mead, she watched the village fade, cottages, the church spire, the green fields. Her world left behind for now. She opened Beatrice's letter again, reading it slowly. Each word carried weight. Vanished suggested no trace, no note. Sinister hinted at danger, maybe crime. Beatrice's trust in her keen mind was flattering but heavy. Miss Marple wasn't a detective, not like those brash men in novels. She was just a woman who noticed things, patterns, habits, the way people lied without saying a word. In St. Mary Mead, she'd solved small puzzles. Who stole Mrs. Price's silver? Why young Tom lied about his whereabouts? But this felt bigger, like stepping from a stream into a river. The train rattled through hills and woods, the landscape turning wilder. Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to Harrow Manor. She'd never visited, but Beatrice had described it once: a stony, sprawling stone house, centuries old, with towers and stained glass. It sounded grand but lonely, too big for one woman. Beatrice lived there with her daughter, Clara, and Clara's son, Edward. There were others, 2 servants, maybe family, but Miss Marple didn't know them yet. She'd learn soon enough. Her mind circled back to Edward, a young man full of energy, maybe reckless. Had he run off with a girl, gambled away money, crossed someone dangerous? Or was it about the manor itself, its history, its secrets? Old houses held grudges, she knew. Debts, betrayals, things buried but not forgotten. She closed her eyes, letting the train's rhythm steady her. Facts first, Jane, she told herself. Don't build castles in the air. The train slowed as it neared Greystone. Miss Marple gathered her things, her suitcase light but solid in her hand. The station was smaller than St. Mary Mead's, with a single platform and a ticket office that looked half asleep. She stepped off the air colder here, sharper. Man in a dark coat waited by a car holding a sign, Miss Marple. Beatrice had sent a driver. It was tall, quiet, with a face that gave nothing away. "Harrow Manor, ma'am?" he asked. "Taking her case?" "Yes, thank you," she said, climbing into the car. It was old, but well kept, the leather seats smelling faintly of polish. As they drove, the town gave way to winding roads, then a long drive lined with oaks. Harrow Manor appeared, its stone walls gray against the darkening sky. It was as grand as Beatrice had said, but grim, too, like it held its breath. The car stopped at the front doors, tall and carved with vines. Miss Marple stepped out, her heart steady but alert. Beatrice's letter had brought her here to a place of shadows and secrets. A door was missing, and something dark waited inside. She straightened her hat, smoothed her coat, and walked forward. Whatever this puzzle was, she'd unravel it, thread by thread. Chapter 2. Arrival at Harrow Manor. The car crunched to a stop on the gravel drive, and Miss Jane Marple peered out at Harrow Manor. The house loomed like a giant, its gray stone walls climbing high under a sky heavy with clouds. Tall windows stared down, their glass dark and uninviting. Towers jutted at each end, sharp against the fading light, and ivy clung to the walls like it was holding the place together. Miss Marple shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of the place. It felt old, heavy with stories nobody wanted to tell. She stepped out, her sensible shoes steady on the ground. The driver, a quiet man with a face like carved wood, carried her small suitcase to the door. "This way, ma'am," he said, his voice low. The front doors were massive, oak, carved with twisting vines, and they creaked open before he could knock. A maid stood there, young, with nervous eyes and a crisp apron. "Miss Marple, Lady Harrow's waiting," she said, bobbing a curtsey. Miss Marple nodded, offering a kind smile. "Thank you, dear." She followed the maid inside, her eyes darting to take it all in. The entrance hall was grand but gloomy, with a high ceiling and a chandelier that flickered like it wasn't sure it wanted to shine. A wide staircase curved upward, its banister polished but worn. Portraits lined the walls, stern men and pale women in old-fashioned clothes, their eyes following her. The air smelled of wax and damp stone, and every step echoed. The maid led her through a maze of corridors, past closed doors and faded tapestries. Miss Marple's sharp mind catalogued everything. The scuff on the floor, the cobweb in a corner, the way the maid's hands twisted together. Small things told big stories. She knew. People thought she was just a nosy old lady, but noticing was her gift. A loose thread in a story could unravel the whole truth. They reached a heavy door, and the maid knocked softly. "Come in," called a familiar voice, warm but tired. The maid opened the door, and there was Lady Beatrice Harrow standing by, a fireplace that crackled with a weak flame. She was thinner than Miss Marple remembered, her silver hair pinned neatly, her black dress simple but elegant. Her eyes, sharp and green, lit up when she saw her friend. "Jane," she said, crossing the room with quick steps. "You came." "Course, Beatrice," Miss Marple said, taking her hands. They were cold, trembling just a little. "Your letter worried me." She kept her voice gentle, but her eyes searched Beatrice's face. There was fear there, hidden under the calm, like a crack in fine china. "Sit." "Please," Beatrice said, waving to a velvet chair by the fire. The room was a small parlor, cozy despite the manor's gloom. Books lined one wall and a tea tray waited on a low table. The maid poured 2 cups, her hands shaky, then slipped out, closing the door. Beatrice sank into a chair, her shoulders sagging. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she said. "It's Edward. He's gone." Miss Marple sipped her tea, letting the warmth steady her. "Tell me everything," she said, her tone soft but firm. She leaned forward, her blue eyes sharp, ready to catch every word, every pause. Beatrice took a breath, her fingers tight around her cup. Edward is my grandson, Clara's boy. You met him once, years ago, in St. Mary Mead. He's 22 now, bright, full of life. He was here at the manor, helping with the estate. 2 weeks ago, there was an argument, family nonsense, I thought. He stormed out, and no one's seen him since. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, into the fire. Not Miss Marple nodded, her mind already working. What was the argument about? She asked, keeping her voice kind, like she was asking about the weather. Beatrice hesitated, her lips pressing tight. Money, mostly. Clara, my daughter, wants to sell part of the estate. Edward disagreed, said it was his heritage. Things got heated. Clara's been fragile since her husband died. Edward's always been protective of her, but they clashed that night. I thought he'd cool off, come back, but he didn't. Miss Marple tilted her head, and the police. Beatrice's face hardened. Useless. They say he's a young man, probably ran off to London or joined friends. They checked his room, asked a few questions, then left. But Jane, she leaned closer, her voice dropping. Edward wouldn't just leave, not without a word. He loves this place, loves us. Something's wrong. I feel it. Miss Marple set her cup down, her mind spinning. A young man, angry, storming out. It could be simple. Boys did foolish things. But Beatrice's fear wasn't foolish. She was steady, not prone to hysterics. If she sensed danger, there was a reason. Who else was here that night? Miss Marple asked, her voice calm, like she was piecing a quilt, not a mystery. Beatrice counted on her fingers. Clara, of course. Sophie, Edward's cousin, she's an artist, lives here. Giles, Clara's friend, was visiting. He's a businessman, I think. And the staff, Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper. Lily, the maid you met. And a few others. She paused, her eyes narrowing. Giles was odd after Edward left. To calm, like he knew something. Miss Marple filed that away. Giles, a name to watch. And Edward's room? Anything unusual? The police found nothing, Beatrice said. But I haven't touched it. You can look yourself. Her eyes pleaded, and Miss Marple nodded. I will, she said. But first, tell me about the manor. Old places like this, they hold secrets. She smiled, softening the words, but her gaze was sharp. Beatrice's mouth twitched. Like she wanted to smile but couldn't. Harrow Manor's been in the family for centuries. It's beautiful but heavy, like it carries every mistake we've made. There are stories, curses, lost treasures, nonsense like that. Edward loved those tales, always poking into old papers, exploring the cellars. Maybe he found something he shouldn't have. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but she kept her face calm. Old houses, old secrets. She'd seen it before in St. Mary Mead families hiding truths, thinking time buried them. We'll sort it out, she said, patting Beatrice's hand. Now, show me to my room. I'd like to freshen up before dinner. Beatrice led her through more corridors, up a creaking staircase. The manor felt alive, whispering with every step, floorboards groaning, wind-rattling windows. Miss Marple's room was small but comfortable, with a 4-poster bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the gardens. The view was dark now, the moon hidden by clouds. Beatrice lingered at the door. Dinner's at 7. The others will be there. Watch them, Jane. I don't know who to trust. I always watch, Miss Marple said, her smile gentle but her eyes like steel. Beatrice nodded and left, her footsteps fading. Alone, Miss Marple unpacked her suitcase, hanging her gray dress and blue cardigan in a narrow wardrobe. She set her hat on a shelf, then sat by the window, her hands folded. The manor pressed around her, its silence loud with secrets. Edward's disappearance wasn't just a family spat. Beatrice's fear, the black-edged letter, the police's dismissalite all pointed to something deeper. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where troubles were small but taught her big lessons. People lied, hid things, but they always left clues a nervous glance. A too quick answer. Here, in this grand, grim house, the clues would be harder to spot, but they were there. She'd find them, starting with dinner. People showed their true selves over food when they thought no one was looking. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Lily, the maid, stood at the door, her face pale. "Dinner in 10 minutes, ma'am," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Lily, miss," Marple said, noting the girl's trembling hands. "Is something wrong?" Lily's eyes darted to the hall, then back. "No, ma'am, just this house. It's heavy, like it's watching." She curtsied and hurried away. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Even the staff felt it, the manners. Wait, it's secrets? She smoothed her dress, checked her reflection in a small mirror, and headed downstairs. The dining room was grand, with a long table set for 5. A chandelier glittered, but the corners stayed dark. Beatrice was already there, talking to a woman in her 40s, Clara, Miss Marple guessed, Edward's mother. She was thin, her face tight with worry, her hands twisting a napkin. "Jane, this is Clara," Beatrice said. Clara's smile was weak, her eyes red-rimmed. "Pleased to meet you," Miss Marple said, shaking her hand. Clara's grip was cold, fleeting. A young woman entered next, her dark hair loose, her dress smudged with paint. "Sophie, the artist." She nodded at Miss Marple, her eyes guarded. Then came Giles, a tall man with slick hair and a charming smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Marple, is it?" he said, his voice smooth. "Beatrice says you're a friend." "I am," Miss Marple said, her smile polite but her mind alert. Giles's handshake was firm, his ring catching the light a heavy silver band with. A strange symbol. She filed it away. Dinner was served, soup, roast, pudding, but the talk was strained. Clara barely ate. Sophie sketched on a napkin, and Giles steered the conversation to safe topics. Weather, London. Miss Marple listened, her eyes moving from face to face. Clara's fear was raw, Sophie's silence heavy, Giles's charm too polished. Beatrice watched them all, her trust in Miss Marple clear as the meal ended. Miss Marple heard a sound, a whisper from the hall, like voices arguing. She glanced at Lily, clearing plates, but the maid's face was blank. Later, in her room, Miss Marple sat by the window, the manor dark outside. The whispers lingered in her mind, servants, maybe talking of a curse. She smiled faintly. Curses were nonsense, but fear was real. Something was wrong here, and she'd find it. One quiet step at a time. Chapter 3. The Family Secrets. Miss Jane Marple woke early. The gray light of dawn creeping through her bedroom curtains at Harrow Manor. The house was quiet, but it felt heavy, like it held its breath, waiting for something to break. She lay still for a moment, her sharp mind already turning over last night's dinner. The strained voices, the guarded looks, the whispers in the hall, they were pieces of a puzzle, and she was determined to fit them together. She rose, her joints stiff, from the damp air, and dressed in her neat gray dress and blue cardigan. Her small mirror showed the same slight figure, white hair pinned tidy, blue eyes bright with purpose. She didn't look like someone who unraveled mysteries, and that was her strength. People let their guard down around an old lady, and she saw what they hid. Downstairs, the manor was stirring. The scent of toast and coffee drifted from the dining room, and Miss Marple followed it, her sensible shoes silent on the polished floors. The dining room was less grand in daylight, its long table set for breakfast. Lady Beatrice Harrow was already there, sipping tea, her face pale but composed. "Good morning, Jane," she said, managing a small smile. "Did you sleep?" "Well enough," Miss Marple said, settling into a chair. "This house has a way of keeping one alert." Her tone was light, but her eyes locked with Beatrice's, sharing a silent understanding. Something was wrong here, and they both knew it. A maid, not Lily, but an older woman with a stern face served porridge and toast. Miss Marple thanked her, noting the woman's quick glance toward the door, like she expected trouble. "Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper," Beatrice whispered when the maid left. "She's loyal, but worried. Everyone is." Miss Marple nodded, spreading jam on her toast. "Tell me about the others," she said, keeping her voice casual. "Clara, Sophie, Giles. Who are they really?" Beatrice set her cup down, her fingers trembling slightly. "Clara's my daughter. Edward's mother. She's fragile. Her husband, Robert, died 5 years ago, heart attack. Sudden. It broke her. She leans on Edward maybe too much. It's business with him, missing nights, tearing her apart." Miss Marple's mind filed that away. A grieving widow, dependent on her son. Fragile could mean nervous, unpredictable. And Sophie? She asked, recalling the young woman's brooding eyes and paint-stained dress. "Sophie's my niece." "My brother's girl," Beatrice said. "She came to live here after her parents died in a car crash. She's 20, an artist, talented, but distant. She and Edward are close, like siblings, but she keeps to herself, always sketching, always watching." Beatrice's voice dropped. "I've seen her drawings, dark things, doors and shadows. It unsettles me." Ms. Marple's interest sharpened. Drawings could reveal thoughts, fears, secrets, and Giles. She prompted, remembering his slick charm and that odd silver ring. Beatrice's lips tightened. "Giles Thornton. He's new, showed up a year ago. Says he's a businessman, imports, exports, vague stuff. Claire likes him. Maybe too much? He's charming, but I don't trust him. He's too slippery. Always here poking into things. Edward didn't like him either." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind racing. A charming outsider, vague job, disliked by the missing boy. Giles was a thread to tug. "Anyone else in the house?" She asked. "Just staff," Beatrice said. "Mrs. Poole, a cook, a groundskeeper. They're loyal. But this place, its stories scare them. Curses, ghosts, nonsense like that. Edward's disappearance has them whispering more." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Old houses breed stories. But people make trouble, not ghosts." She patted Beatrice's hand. "I'd like to meet the others again, properly. And see Edward's room." Beatrice nodded. "They'll be at lunch. I'll show you Edward's room after." Her eyes held. Gratitude and something else - hope - the morning passed quietly. Miss Marple explored the Manor's ground floor, her steps slow but deliberate. She wandered through a library with dusty books, a drawing room with faded curtains, a conservatory, where plants wilted in the gloom. Every room felt heavy, like it remembered too much. She noticed small things. A scuffed floorboard near a bookcase, a locked door in a hallway, a servant's quick glance away. Clues, maybe, or just an old house's quirks. At noon, the family gathered for lunch in the dining room. Clara was there, her face pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Sophie sat across from her, sketching on a scrap of paper, her dark hair falling over her eyes. Giles arrived last, his smile bright but his eyes sharp, like he was sizing everyone up. Beatrice introduced Miss Marple again, calling her an old friend visiting. The others nodded, polite but guarded. Lunch was cold, meats, bread, and salad. Served by Mrs. Poole, the talk was stiff, like everyone was afraid to say too much. Clara spoke first, her voice shaky. "Jane, you're from St. Mary Mead? It must be peaceful there." Her eyes begged for distraction. "It is," Miss Marple said, her tone warm, small, quiet. "Everyone knows each other." She smiled, inviting. "Trust." But her eyes watched Clara's hands, trembling as they cut her bread. Sophie glanced up from her sketch. "Sounds boring," she said, her voice flat. "No secrets in a place like that." Miss Marple chuckled. "Oh, every village has secrets. People are the same everywhere, hiding little things, thinking no one notices." Her words were light, but she saw Sophie's pencil pause, just for a second. Giles leaned forward, his charm on full display. "And what do you notice, Miss Marple? You've got sharp eyes, I bet." His tone was teasing, but his gaze was hard, testing her. She met his eyes, her smile serene. "I notice what people don't say, Mr. Thornton. Silences speak loud, don't they?" She kept her voice sweet, but Giles's smile faltered, just a fraction. Clara's fork clattered against her plate. "Enough about secrets," she snapped, her voice sharp. "Edward's gone, and we're sitting here chatting like it's nothing." Her eyes filled with tears, and she glared at Sophie. "You know where he is, don't you? You were always whispering together, plotting." Sophie's face went cold. "Don't start, Clara. I don't know anything. Edward didn't tell me his plans." Shoved her sketchbook aside, her hands clenched. Beatrice raised a hand. "Enough. Both of you. Jane's here to help, not to watch us bicker." Her voice was firm, but her eyes pleaded for calm. Miss Marple stayed quiet, her mind soaking it all in. Clara's outburst, Sophie's defensiveness, Giles's silence, they were threads tangled but telling. She noticed Sophie's sketchbook left open on the table. The drawing showed a door, heavy and locked, with shadows creeping around it. It wasn't just art, felt like a message. Lunch ended awkwardly, with Clara storming out and Sophie retreating. To her room, Giles lingered, offering to show Miss Marple the gardens, but she declined, saying she needed rest. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed, like he knew she was watching him. Beatrice led Miss Marple to Edward's room, up a narrow staircase to the manor's east wing. The room was small but tidy, with a single bed, a desk, and a wardrobe. A window overlooked the moors, gray and endless. "The police looked but found nothing," Beatrice said, her voice tight. "His clothes are here, his books. He didn't pack." Miss Marple moved slowly, her eyes scanning every inch. The bed was made, but the blanket was slightly askew, like someone had sat on it. The desk held papers, estate maps, old letters, a notebook with Edward's handwriting. She flipped through it, finding notes about the manor's history. "Harrow curse ruby amulet hidden." The words sent a chill through her. She'd heard of such things in St. Mary Madoled, tales of treasures tied to trouble. "Anything?" Beatrice asked, hovering by the door. "Maybe," Miss Marple said, tucking the notebook under her arm. "I'll read this later." She checked the wardrobe, finding Edward's clothes neatly hung. But one jacket was missing a button, and the floor beneath it had faint dirt marks, like boots had stood there recently. Back in her room, Miss Marple sat by the window, the notebook open in her lap. Edward had been digging into the manors, past, chasing stories of a ruby amulet. Was it real, or just a boy's fancy? She thought of Sophie's drawing, that locked door. Doors hid things, rooms, secrets, maybe answers. Clara's accusation did Sophie no more than she let on. Chaos's ring flashed in her mind, too, its symbol odd, unfamiliar. That evening before dinner, Miss Marple wandered the manors. Halls, her steps quiet. She passed a servant's staircase and heard voices again, whispers, urgent. "The curse. It's real." He shouldn't have looked. The words faded as footsteps approached, and she slipped into a shadow, her heart steady but quick. The speakers passed Lily and another maid, their faces pale. Miss Marple returned to her room, her mind buzzing. The manor was a web, and Edward's disappearance was its center. Clara's fear, Sophie's secrets, Giles's charm, the staff's whispers, they all connected. But how? She thought of St. Mary Mead, where small lies hid big truths. This was bigger, darker, but the rules were the same. People left clues, always. She dressed for dinner, her gray dress crisp, her hat left behind. The manor's chill seeped into her bones, but her resolve was warm. Edward was out there, alive or not, and she'd find him. The amulet, the curse, the locked door, they were pieces, and she'd make them fit. As she headed downstairs, the manor's shadows seemed to watch, but Miss Marple walked on, her quiet strength a match for any darkness. Chapter 4. The hidden room, Miss Jane Marple woke to the soft patter of rain against her window at Harrow Manor. The gray light matched the house's mood, heavy, secretive, like it was guarding truths it didn't want to share. She lay still, her mind already piecing together the threads from yesterday. Clara's tears, Sophie's cryptic drawings, Giles's slippery charm, and Edward's notebook with its talk of a ruby amulet. The manor was a puzzle, and every creak, every whisper was a clue. Today, she'd tug at those threads, starting with the house itself. She dressed in her gray dress and blue cardigan, her movements slow but sure. Her mirror showed a slight white-haired woman with sharp blue eyes, unassuming but alert. People saw her as harmless, and that was her weapon. They spoke freely, moved carelessly, and she noticed everything, the glance that lingered, the lie, tucked in a smile. Breakfast was quiet, just her and Beatrice in the dining room. The rain drummed outside, and the chandelier flickered, casting shadows on the walls. Beatrice looked tired, her green eyes clouded with worry. "Any thoughts, Jane?" she asked, stirring her tea. "A few," Miss Marple said, spreading jam on her toast. "This house holds answers. I'd like to explore it today, if that's all right." Her voice was gentle, but her gaze was firm. Beatrice nodded. "Go anywhere you like. The staff won't mind." She hesitated, then added, "Be careful. Some places they feel wrong." Miss Marple smiled, patting her hand. "I'm always careful, dear." But her mind noted Beatrice's warning. Old houses like this one carried weight grudges, secrets, things left buried. She'd seen it in St. Mary Mead, where a locked attic or a dusty letter could unravel a family. Harrow Manor was grander, but the rules were the same. After breakfast, she began her search. The manor was a maze of corridors, staircases, and closed doors, its stone walls cold under her touch. She moved quietly, her sensible shoes barely whispering on the floors. The ground floor held the library, drawing room, and conservatory she'd seen yesterday, but she wanted more places less traveled, where secrets might hide. She started in the west wing, where the air smelled of dust and time. The halls were narrower here, the portraits older, their faces stern. She passed a locked door, its keyhole dark, and made a mental note. Locked doors meant something worth hiding. Further on, she found a tapestry hanging on a wall. Its colors faded, but its scene clear. A knight holding a red gem, his face grim. A ruby amulet, maybe? She paused, her heart quickening. Edward's notebook had mentioned an amulet tied to a curse. Coincidence? Or a clue? She lifted the tapestry's edge, curious. The wall behind was stone like the rest, but a faint draft brushed her fingers. She pressed gently, and the stone shifted, revealing a seam, a hidden door. Her pulse jumped, but she kept calm, glancing around to ensure she was alone. The hall was empty, the manor's silence thick. She pushed harder, and the stone swung inward, creaking softly. A narrow passage stretched into darkness, its air cold and stale. Miss Marple hesitated. She was no young adventurer, and her knees ached in the damp. But curiosity pulled her forward, stronger than caution. She stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The passage was tight, its walls rough, and it sloped downward, leading somewhere deep in the manor's heart. She moved slowly, one hand on the wall, her mind sharp despite the gloom. The passage ended at a wooden door, old but sturdy, with no lock but a heavy latch. She lifted it, wincing at the faint squeak, and pushed the door open. Inside was a small room, no bigger than her parlor in St. Mary Mead. Dust coated everything, swirling in the air as she stepped in. A single window, high and barred, let in a sliver of gray light. The room held a table, a chair, and a wooden chest, slid carved with the same vine pattern as the manor's front doors. Miss Marple's heart beat faster, but her face stayed calm. This was no ordinary storeroom. It felt important, like a place where truths were hidden. She approached the table first, finding a stack of letters tied with string. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but readable. She slipped one free, her fingers careful. It was dated 50 years ago, addressed to Lord Harrow, Edward's grandfather, maybe. The writer, someone named Eliza, warned of the amulets. Curse and begged him to hide it where no one will look. Miss Marple's lips pursed. The amulet again. Not just a story then. She tucked the letters into her cardigan pocket, planning to read them later. The chest drew her next. Its lid was heavy, groaning as she lifted it. Inside were more papers, a few old books, and a leather-bound journal. She picked up the journal, its cover worn but intact. The first page bore a name, Robert Harrow. Clara's husband, Edward's father, dead 5 years. Her fingers traced the name, her mind racing. Why was his journal hidden here? She flipped through it, scanning quickly. Robert's writing was neat, precise, but urgent. He wrote of the manor's history of a ruby amulet stolen long ago by a Harrow ancestor. It brings misfortune. He wrote every owner suffers death, ruin, madness. I've found it, hidden in the chapel, but I dare not move it. The family must never know. The last entry was dated a week before his death. Someone's watching. They know I've been searching, I fear, for Clara, for Edward. Miss Marple closed the journal, her heart heavy. Robert had known something dangerous, and now Edward was gone, chasing the same secret. She slipped the journal into her pocket with the letters, her mind spinning. The amulet was real, hidden, tied to trouble. Had Edward found it? Someone stopped him. She searched the chest further, finding nothing but old deeds and maps. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker, like it was pressing her to leave. She closed the chest, memorizing the room's details, the barred window, the dusty table, the faint scratches on the floor, like something heavy had been dragged. Clues, all of them. But what did they mean? As she turned to leave, a sound froze. Her a creak from the passage. Her breath caught, but she stayed still, her small figure blending with the shadows. The creak came again, closer, then stopped. Someone was there just outside the door. She waited, her heart steady despite the danger. Seconds passed, then a soft thud, like a door closing far off. The passage was silent again. Miss Marple exhaled, her mind clear. Whoever it was hadn't seen her, but they'd been close. She slipped out, latching the door behind her, and retraced her steps through the passage. The tapestry was as she'd left it, and the hall was empty. She smoothed her cardigan, the journal and letters heavy in her pocket, and headed back to her room, her steps calm but quick. In her room, she locked the door and sat by the window, the rain still falling outside. She read the letters first, each one echoing Eliza's fear of the amulet's curse. They spoke of deaths in the Harrow family, accidents, illnesses, all tied to the gem. The journal was worse. Robert's fear leaped off the pages, his worry. For his family he'd hidden the amulet, but someone had known, watched him. Miss Marple's mind flashed to Giles, his odd ring, his too smooth charm. Or Sophie, with her dark drawings of locked doors. Even Clara, fragile but fierce, could be hiding something. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where village gossip often held truth. Years ago, a farmer's wife had vanished, and whispers of a hidden treasure led Miss Marple to a locked shed and a jealous husband. This was bigger, but the pattern was the same: secrets, fear, something hidden. The amulet was the key, and Edward had been close to it. A scream shattered her thoughts. High and sharp, echoing through the manor. Miss Marple stood, her heart racing, but her mind steady. She hurried downstairs, following the sound to the drawing room. Clara stood there, her face white, clutching a blood-stained scarf. Beatrice was beside her, trying to calm her. Sophie and Giles rushed in, their faces tense. "It's Edward's," Clara sobbed, holding the scarf. "I found it in his room, under the bed. He's hurt, or worse." Her voice broke, and she sank into a chair. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "May I see it, Clara?" Clara hesitated, then handed her the scarf. It was blue, soft, with dark red stains that looked fresh. Miss Marple turned it over, her eyes sharp. The stains were uneven, like they'd been smeared on purpose. Blood, maybe? But something felt off. Where exactly was it? She asked, her tone kind, like she was asking about a lost glove. Under the bed, Clara said, her voice shaking. I was looking for anything a clue. Then I saw it. Miss Marple nodded, her mind working. The police had searched Edward's room, and Beatrice said it hadn't been touched. A scarf like this, blood-stained, should have been found. Someone had placed it there recently to scare or mislead. She glanced at the others, Clara's tears, Sophie's clenched jaw, Giles's calm face to calm. One of them knew more than they said. Beatrice took Clara's arm. Come, rest. We'll figure this out. She looked at Miss Marple, her eyes pleading for answers. I'll keep this, Miss Marple said, folding the scarf carefully. It might tell us something. She smiled, reassuring, but her mind was a storm of questions. The hidden room, the amulet, the scarf, they were connected. And Edward was at the heart of it. Back in her room, she locked the scarf in her suitcase, along with the journal and letters. The manor's shadows seemed darker now, its secrets closer. To the surface, someone was playing a game, hiding, lying, maybe worse. But Miss Marple was playing too, and she played to win. She'd find Edward and the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. Chapter 5. The Village Connection. Miss Jane Marple sat by her window at Harrow Manor. The morning rain gone, but the sky still heavy with clouds. Her hands rested in her lap, but her mind raced, weaving together the clues from the past days. Edward's disappearance, the hidden room, the ruby amulet's curse, and now the blood-stained scarf Clara found. Each was a thread in a tangled web, and she was determined to untangle it. The manor held secrets, but secrets spilled beyond walls, into the nearby village of Greystone. Today, she'd chase those whispers. Starting with the people who saw things others missed. She dressed in her gray dress and blue cardigan, pinning her white hair neatly. Her mirror showed a slight, unassuming woman, but her blue eyes were sharp, ready to catch lies in a glance or a word. In St. Mary Mead, she'd learned that villages were like sponges, soaking up truths people thought hidden. Greystone would be no different at breakfast. Only Beatrice was in the dining room, her face drawn. Jane, any progress? She asked, her voice low, like she feared the walls listening. Some, Miss Marple said, buttering her toast. I'd like to visit the village today. People talk, and talk reveals things. Her tone was light, but her gaze was steady. Beatrice nodded. Take the car. John, the driver, will bring you. Be careful, Jane. Greystone's small, but it's watchful. Miss Marple smiled, used to watchful places. She didn't mention the scarf or the hidden room. Not yet. Beatrice was her ally, but the fewer who knew, the better. Secrets had a way of slipping out. After breakfast, she gathered her coat and hat, the sensible one with a single feather. Driver John waited by the manor's front doors, his face as blank as ever. Greystone, ma'am? He asked, opening the car door. Double quotes, yes, please, Miss Marple said, settling into the leather seat. The car rolled down the long drive past oaks and moors, the manor shrinking behind them. The road to Greystone was winding, bordered by stone walls and fields. She watched the landscape, her mind turning. Edward had vanished 2 weeks ago after a family argument. The police found nothing, but villagers might have seen something a stranger. A fight? A clue. Greystone was smaller than St. Mary Mead. Its main street lined with a post office, a shop, a church, and a pub called the Black Boar. The pub was her target. Pubs were where tongues loosened, where gossip flowed like ale. John parked near the church, and Miss Marple stepped out, her small figure blending with the gray stone buildings. I'll be an hour or two, she told him. He nodded, lighting a cigarette, his eyes scanning the street. The Black Boar was dim inside. its air thick with smoke and the smell of beer. A few men sat at tables, farmers and laborers, their voices low. The barkeep, a grizzled man with a scarred hand, looked up as she entered. "Morning, miss," he said, wiping a glass. "What can I do for you?" Miss Marple smiled, her face soft but her eyes sharp. "Cup of tea if you have it," she said, settling at the bar. "I'm visiting Harrow Manor, and I thought I'd see the village." The barkeep, his name was stitched on his apron, nodded, setting a kettle on. Harrow Manor, a big old place. Lots of stories. His tone was casual, but his glance was curious. "Oh, I love stories," Miss Marple said, her voice warm, inviting trust. "What did they say about the manor?" Tom poured her tea, leaning closer. "Curses, mostly. Old Harrow family, rich, but unlucky. Deaths, disappearances, talk of a red gem that brings bad luck. Nonsense, if you ask me. But folks believe it." He shrugged, but his eyes flicked to the door like he expected someone to walk in. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind noting his unease. Disappearances like young Edward Harrow. She kept her tone light, like she was asking about the weather. Tom's hand paused on the glass he was wiping. "You heard about that? Aye, Edward was here, maybe 3 weeks back. Fine lad, came in now and then for a pint. Last time, he was arguing with a stranger, loud, heated. Never saw him." After her heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. A stranger? What did he look like? Tom scratched his chin. Tall, dark coat, fancy ring on his hand, silver with a funny mark, like a cross with a loop. Didn't catch his name. He left quick, and Edward followed. That was the last I saw of him. Miss Marple's mind flashed to Giles, his silver ring glinting at dinner, cross with a lupin egg. Maybe, or something else. She pulled a small notebook from her purse, pretending to jot a recipe. "Could you sketch that ring?" she asked. Sliding the notebook over, Tom raised an eyebrow, but took a pencil and drew a rough shape across with a looped top, jagged lines around it. "Like that," he said, pushing it back. "Odd thing, stuck in my head." "Thank you," Miss Marple said, tucking the notebook away. "Anything else about Edward?" Tom shook his head. Just that he was worked up, talking about the manor, old secrets. Kid was always curious, poking into things. He turned to serve another customer, and Miss Marple finished her tea, her mind racing. Edward arguing with a stranger, a ring. Like Giles's talk of secrets, it wasn't proof, but it was a thread, and she'd pull it. She left the pub, stepping into the damp air. The street was quiet, but she felt eyes on her, a woman sweeping her stoop, a man lingering by the shop. Villages watched strangers, just like St. Mary Mead. She walked to the church, a small stone building with a lopsided steeple. Inside it was cool and silent, the air smelling of wax and old wood. A vicar, thin and gray-haired, was arranging hymnals. "Good morning," Miss Marple said, her smile kind. "I'm visiting from St. Mary Mead. Such a lovely church." The vicar beamed. "Welcome. I'm Reverend Hale. We're simple here, but proud." He offered her a pew, and they sat chatting about village life. Miss Marple steered the talk gently, mentioning Harrow Manor. "Oh, the Harrows," Hale said, his face clouding. "Good family, but troubled. Young Edward's missing, you know. Broke his mother's heart. I saw him last month, asking about old records, baptisms, burials, odd things. Said he was researching the family." Miss Marple tilted her head. "God, things like what?" Hale frowned. "Something about a theft, long ago. A gem, maybe." He was cagey, didn't say much, seemed worried. He sighed. "I pray he's safe." "So do I," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but her mind sharp. Edward had been digging, just like his father's journal said. It's the amulet. The manor's secrets, he'd been close to something dangerous. She thanked the vicar and left, her steps slow as she thought. The pub and church gave her pieces. Edward's argument, the stranger's ring, his search for old secrets. Back at the car, John was waiting, his cigarette gone. "Manor, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes," she said, climbing in. The drive was quiet, but her mind buzzed. Giles's ring matched Tom's sketch, and his charm hid something she felt it. At the manor, she went straight to her room, locking the door. She spread the scarf, the journal, and Tom's sketch on her bed, studying them. The scarf's blood looked staged, the journal warned of danger. And the ring tied Giles to Edward's last known moment. Dinner that evening was tense. Clara was silent, her eyes red. Sophie sketched, her pencil scratching loudly. Giles was all smiles, asking Miss Marple about her village, but his eyes watched her too closely. Beatrice tried to keep the peace, but the air was thick with unspoken words. Miss Marple waited for the right moment, then spoke, her voice sweet but deliberate. "Mr. Thornton, that's a striking ring you wear. What's its story?" She smiled, like she was just curious. Giles's hand twitched, but his smile held. "Oh, this. Just a trinket. Picked it up abroad. It's common design, nothing special." He changed the subject, but his voice was tighter now. Miss Marple nodded, her face serene, but her mind racing. Common design. Tom's sketch said otherwise. Giles was lying or hiding something. She glanced at Sophie, whose pencil had stopped, her eyes on Giles. Clara stared at her plate, her hands trembling. The room felt smaller, the shadows deeper. After dinner, Miss Marple lingered in the hall, pretending to admire a portrait. She heard Giles on the stairs, his voice low, talking to someone, Mrs. Poole. "Maybe. Keep it quiet," he said. "No need to stir things up." The words faded, but they chilled her. Stir what? Edward's disappearance? The amulet. In her room, she locked the door and sat by the window, the manor dark outside. The village had given her a link. Giles, the stranger, the ring. Edward had been chasing the amulet like his father, and it had led to trouble. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a stolen locket had unraveled a theft ring. This was bigger, but the pattern held lies, greed, secrets, left clues. The manor creaked like it was whispering back. Miss Marple's resolve hardened. Giles was a thread, and she'd pull until the web came apart. The rain started again, soft against the glass, but her mind was clear, ready for the next step. Chapter 6. The midnight intruder. Miss Jane Marple sat by her window at Harrow Manor, the night deep and dark outside. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, the manor silence thick with secrets. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was too busy stitching together the clues she'd gathered. Edward's disappearance, the ruby amulet's curse, the blood-stained scarf, and now the ring linking Giles to a stranger in the village. Each piece fit somewhere, but the picture was still blurry. Tonight, she'd watch and listen, because secrets moved in the dark. She wore her blue cardigan over her nightgown, her white hair loose but neat. Her small figure blended with the shadows, her blue eyes sharp despite the hour. In St. Mary Mead, she'd learned that night revealed what day hid stolen glances, whispered plans, footsteps where none should be. Harrow Manor was grander, but its heart was the same. People hiding truths, leaving traces. She'd locked her door. The scarf, journal, and Tom's sketch safe in her suitcase. The journal's words echoed in her mind. Robert Harrow's fear, his discovery of the amulet, his sense of being watched. Edward had followed his father's path, chasing the same secret, and now he was gone. Giles was part of it. She felt it in his too smooth lies about his ring. But how? And who else was tangled in this web? A faint creak broke her thoughts, like a floorboard sighing under weight. She froze, her heart steady but alert. The manor was old, full of noises, but this was different, deliberate, close. She stood, her slippers silent, and moved to the door, pressing her ear against it. Nothing at first, then another creak, further down the hall. Someone was moving, and they didn't want to be heard. Miss Marple's mind raced. She could stay safe, wait for morning, but safety wouldn't find Edward. She unlocked her door, slow and quiet, and slipped into the hall. The corridor was dark, lit only by moonlight through tall windows. Shadows danced on the walls, the portrait's eyes glinting like they watched her. She stood still, listening. A soft thud came from below, near the manor's back stairs. Her pulse quickened, but her resolve held firm. She crept forward, her small figure hugging the wall. The stairs were narrow, meant for servants, and they creaked under her weight. She paused after each step, her ears straining. At the bottom, a faint glow flickered a lantern, maybe moving toward the cellar. Cellars were for storage, but also for secrets. In St. Mary Mead, a farmer's cellar had hidden stolen goods. What did Harrow Manors hold? She followed the glow, her steps careful. The cellar door was heavy, iron-bound, and it stood ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. She peered through the gap, her breath shallow. A figure moved inside, their back to her, holding a lantern. The figure was slim, with dark hair. Sophie, Edward's cousin. Miss Marple's heart jumped. Sophie, with her cryptic drawings of locked doors, was sneaking around at midnight. Why? Sophie knelt by a wall, her hands fumbling with something key, maybe, or a latch. The lantern cast long shadows, making the cellar feel alive, watchful. Miss Marple stayed still, her mind cataloging every detail. Sophie's quick movements, the heavy door behind her, the crates stacked in the corner, marked with strange symbols. Symbols like the one on Giles's ring. She couldn't be sure. Sophie unlocked a smaller door in the wall, hidden behind a crate. It creaked open, revealing a dark space beyond. She slipped inside, the lantern's light fading. Miss Marple hesitated. Following was risky. Sophie might see her, or the door might lock behind them. But staying meant missing answers. She took a step forward, then froze as Sophie's head turned, her eyes scanning the cellar. Miss Marple ducked behind a crate, her heart pounding but her mind clear. Sophie's gaze lingered, then she muttered something too low to harangue, closed the door behind her, the lock clicked, and the cellar went dark. Miss Marple waited, counting her breaths until she was sure Sophie was gone. She crept forward, her fingers brushing the hidden door. It was solid, cold, with no keyhole, just a latch that needed a key she didn't have. She straightened, her mind racing. Sophie was searching for something. Edward, maybe, or the amulet. Her drawings of locked doors weren't just art. Today were clues, maybe maps. But why sneak at night? Was she hiding from Clara, Giles, or someone else? Miss Marple's thoughts flicked to the crates, their symbols nagging at her. She'd check them later, in daylight, when it was safer. She retraced her steps, her slippers silent on the stone floor. The manor was still, but it felt alive, its shadows whispering. Back in her room, she locked the door and sat by the window, her hands folded. The night was quiet now, but her mind buzzed. Sophie's midnight trip, the hidden door, the crates, they were pieces, and they pointed to Edward. He'd been chasing the amulet like his father, and it had led to danger. Sophie knew something, but was she friend or foe? Miss Marple's eyes drifted to her suitcase, where the journal, scarf, and sketch waited. She pulled out the journal, rereading Robert's words. Someone's watching. They know I've been searching. Had Sophie watched Edward, or was she searching for him, like Miss Marple? The scarf, with its staged blood, felt like a trick meant to scare or mislead. And Giles's ring, matching the strangers in the village, his lie about it being common was a crack in his charm. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a stolen bicycle had led her to a liar's nervous tic. Small things revealed big truths, and Harrow Manor was full of small things. Sophie's drawings, Giles's ring, the cellar's crates. She needed to talk to Sophie, but not yet. Confronting her now might push her deeper into hiding. Patience was her weapon, as sharp as her eyes. A soft knock startled her. She slipped the journal under her pillow and opened the door a crack. Lily, the young maid, stood there, her face pale, her apron twisted in her hands. Miss Marple, ma'am, she whispered, glancing down the hall. I saw you in the hall. Shouldn't be out at night. It's not safe, Miss Marple's. Eyebrows rose, but her voice stayed gentle. Thank you, Lily, but I'm fine. Why isn't it safe? Lily's eyes darted away. Just the house. Things happen. People see things. She hesitated, then blurted, Edward was poking into old stories like you. Look what happened to him. She curtsied and fled, her footsteps fading. Miss Marple closed the door, her mind sharp. Lily's fear was real, and her warning tied Edward to the manor's secrets. The staff knew more than they said, whispers of curses, of Edward's curiosity. She sat again, her thoughts circling. Sophie's midnight search. Lily's warning, Giles's lie, they were connected. But how? The amulet was the key, hidden somewhere. Maybe behind that locked door. Morning came slowly, the sky gray but dry. Miss Marple dressed and went downstairs, her face calm, but her senses alert. Breakfast was tense, with Clara staring at her plate. Sophie silent and Giles chatting about the weather, his smile too bright. Beatrice caught Miss Marple's eye, her worry clear. Miss Marple nodded slightly, a promise to keep digging. After breakfast, she found Sophie in the library, sketching. By a window. The girl looked up, her dark eyes guarded. Miss Marple, she said, her pencil pausing. You're staying longer? For a bit, Miss Marple said, settling into a chair. Your drawings are lovely. That door you sketch, it's striking. Her tone was kind, but her words were a probe. Sophie's hand tightened on her pencil. Just something I imagined, she said too quickly. Nothing real. Miss Marple smiled, letting the lie pass. Imagination's powerful. Edward liked stories, didn't he? Old ones? About the manor? Sophie's face closed off. He did. Too much. She stood, gathering her sketchbook. I have work to do. She left her steps quick. Miss Marple stayed still, her mind working. Sophie was scared, hiding something, but her love for Edward was real. She wasn't the enemy, not yet. Miss Marple needed to see that cellar again. Check those crates, find that door. But daylight was risky to many eyes. She'd wait for the right moment. Lunch brought more tension. Clara snapped at Giles, accusing him of not caring about Edward. You're always so calm, she spat. Like it doesn't matter, he's gone. Giles's smile didn't waver. I care, Clara, but panicking won't help. His voice was smooth, but his eyes flicked to Miss Marple. Like he knew she was watching. She kept quiet, her fork moving slowly. Clara's anger, Giles's calm, Sophie's silence, they were pieces, and they fit somewhere. The cellar was her next step, but she needed a plan. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a hidden letter had cracked a theft. This was darker, but the rules held. Watch, listen, wait for the liar to slip. That afternoon she walked the manor's grounds, her coat buttoned against the chill. The moors stretched wide, gray and endless, the manor looming behind her. She passed the cellar's outer door, locked with a heavy chain. No way in, not now. But Sophie had a key, and keys could be found. Dinner was quieter, the family drained. Miss Marple watched Giles's ring, its symbol clear known Ankh, like Tom's. Sketch. His lie was bolder in her mind, his charm thinner. She caught Sophie's eye once, but the girl looked away. Her sketchbook closed. In her room, Miss Marple sat by the window, the manor dark and still. The midnight intruder Sophie had shown her the cellar's secrets. The crates, the locked door, the amulet, they were close, and so was Edward's truth. She'd find a way in soon and pull the web apart. Her small hands folded, her resolve like steel. The manor could whisper its curses, but she'd whisper back with answers. Chapter 7. The trapped Miss Jane Marple sat in her room at Harrow Manor, the morning light weak through the window. The manor was quiet, but its silence felt heavy, like a held breath before a storm. Her mind spun with clues. Edward's disappearance, the ruby amulet's curse, the blood-stained scarf, Giles's ring, and Sophie's midnight trip to the cellar. Each was a thread in a dark web, and she was close to its center. Today, she'd pull harder, setting a trap to catch the truth. She, dressed in her gray dress and blue cardigan, her white hair pinned neatly. Her mirror showed a small, unassuming woman, but her blue eyes were sharp, ready to spot a lie in a glance. In St. Mary Mead, she'd learned that people hid their sins. But they always slipped a nervous twitch, a too-quick answer. Harrow Manor was grander, but the game was the same. She'd play it and win. At breakfast, Beatrice was alone, her face pale, her tea untouched. "Jane, anything new?" she asked, her voice low, like she feared the walls. "Some," Miss Marple said, spreading jam on her toast. "I need to share something, but privately." Her tone was calm, but her gaze held Beatrice's firm and urgent. Beatrice nodded, her eyes flickering with hope. After breakfast, in my parlor, she glanced at the door where Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper, was clearing plates, her face blank but her hands tense. Miss Marple ate slowly, her mind working. Thaler was Key Sophie's hidden door, the crates with strange symbols, the amulets. Shadow over it all. Giles was part of it, his ring tying him to the stranger in the village. Scarf was a trick, meant to scare, but it had sharpened her focus. She needed to flush out the culprit, and that meant taking a risk. In Beatrice's parlor. The fire crackled, but the room felt cold. Beatrice locked the door, her hands trembling. "What is it, Jane?" she asked, sitting close. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice soft but clear. "I found a hidden room with letters and a journal Roberts. He wrote about the ruby amulet. Hidden in the chapel, tied to a curse. Edward was chasing it like his father. Someone knows and they're keeping him silent." She paused, watching Beatrice's face pale. "We need to draw them out. Tell me about the chapel." Beatrice's breath caught. The chapel's old part of the manor's heart. Small, rarely used, but there's a crypt below with family tombs. Robert spent time there before he died. The amulet's hidden? It could be there. Her eyes widened. "You think someone took Edward because of it?" "I think someone wants the amulet," Miss Marple said. "And they'll act if they think it's found. Let's spread a rumor we've found it in the chapel. Watch who moves, who panics." Her voice was gentle, but her plan was steel. Beatrice nodded, her jaw tight. "I'll tell Clara, let it slip to the staff. It'll spread." "But Jane, it's dangerous." "Danger finds truth," Miss Marple said, her smile faint but firm. "I'll watch, and we'll see who bites." They planned carefully. Beatrice would tell Clara at lunch, loud enough for Mrs. Poole to hear. The staff would whisper, and the rumor would reach Giles and Sophie. Miss Marple would stay close, her eyes on everyone. If the culprit thought the amulet was found, they'd go to the chapel, confront someone, or slip up. She'd be ready. Lunch was tense, the dining room dim despite the candles. Clara was there, her hands twisting a napkin, her eyes red. Sophie sketched, her face closed off. Giles smiled, but his charm felt thin, like ice about to crack. Beatrice played her part, her voice carrying as she spoke to Clara. "Jane found something in Edward's room, a note about the chapel. We checked, and we think the amulet's there, hidden all this time." Clara gasped, her napkin falling. "The amulet? That old curse? Is it safe?" "We're not sure," Beatrice said, glancing at Mrs. Poole, who was serving soup, her face blank but her eyes sharp. "We'll lock the chapel tonight, decide tomorrow." Miss Marple watched, her fork moving slowly. Clara's shock seemed real, her fear raw. Sophie's pencil stopped, her gaze flicking to Beatrice, then away. Giles's smile froze, his fingers tightening on his glass. "An amulet," he said, his voice light. "Sounds like a fairy tale." But his eyes were hard, locked on Miss Marple. She met his gaze, her smile serene. "Old houses love fairy tales. Mr. Thornton, they often hide truth." Her words were soft, but they cut, and she saw his jaw twitch. The meal ended, and the rumor spread. Miss Marple heard whispers in the hall lily telling another maid about the cursed gem found in the chapel. Mrs. Poole's voice was sharp, hushing them, but the seed was planted. The manor buzzed, its shadows thicker. Like it knew a storm was coming. Miss Marple spent the afternoon in the library, pretending to read but watching the house. Clara paced the drawing room, muttering to herself. Sophie vanished to her room, her sketchbook clutched tight. Giles lingered near the chapel door, his hands in his pockets, his face too calm. Miss Marple noted it all, her mind a map of movements, motives, lies. Dinner was quiet, the air heavy. Clara barely ate, her eyes darting to the door. Sophie was silent, her sketchbook absent. Giles talked too much, his charm loud, like he was covering something. Beatrice caught Miss Marple's eye, her nod subtle but clear. The trap was set. After dinner, Miss Marple slipped to her room, changing into her dark coat and soft shoes. She'd watch the chapel tonight, from a hidden spot. The manor was dark, its corridors empty, but she felt eyes everywhere. She moved quietly, her small figure blending with the shadows. The chapel was at the manor's east end, its door heavy, oak carved with angels. She found a nook nearby, behind a tapestry, where she could see without being seen. The hours dragged, the manor creaking, the night cold. Her knees ached, but her mind stayed sharp. At midnight, a shadow moved. Giles, his coat dark, his steps silent. He carried a small tool, maybe a crowbar, and worked at the chapel door. Miss Marple's heart raced, but she stayed still, her breath shallow. He was taking the bait. The door creaked open, and Giles slipped inside. She waited, counting seconds, then followed her steps, careful. The chapel was dim, lit by moonlight through stained glass. Giles was at the altar, prying at a stone slab. He didn't see her, his focus tight. She stepped closer, then froze as a second figure emerged from the crypt. Stairs a man, tall, with a scarf hiding his face. "Thornton," the man hissed, his voice low. "You said it was here. Where is it?" Giles spun, his face pale. "Supposed to be under the altar. The old woman found it, they said." The man grabbed Giles's collar. "You're slipping, Thornton. It's not here. We're done." His voice was sharp, dangerous. Miss Marple's heart pounded, but her mind was clear. The stranger, Giles's partner. Maybe the man from the village. They wanted the amulet, and they'd acted fast. She needed to move, get help, but the chapel felt like a trap now. Closing around her, she backed toward the door, her foot brushing a pew. It scraped loud in the silence. Giles's head snapped up, his eyes finding her. "Who's there?" He barked, stepping forward. Miss Marple didn't wait. She turned, her small frame quick despite her age, and ran, her slippers soft but fast. The stranger cursed, his footsteps heavy behind her. She ducked into a side corridor, her breath short, her mind racing. She knew the manor's maze hallways, staircases, hiding spots. She slipped behind a curtain, her heart hammering, and waited. The footsteps passed, the men's voices fading. "Find her," the stranger growled. "She's trouble." Giles muttered something, and they split, their steps echoing away. Miss Marple stayed still, her mind working. Giles was hunting the amulet with a partner, and they were desperate. The trap had worked, but it had turned on her. She needed to reach Beatrice, get to safety, but the manor was alive with danger now. She crept out, her eyes scanning the dark, and made her way to Beatrice's room, knocking softly. Beatrice opened the door, her face white. "Jane, what's happened?" Miss Marple slipped inside, locking the door. "Giles is after the amulet with another man. They're in the chapel now, but they saw me. We need to call the police, quietly." Beatrice nodded, her hands shaking but her voice firm. There's a phone in the study. Come." They moved fast, the manor's shadows pressing close. Study was locked, but Beatrice had a key. Inside, she dialed the police, her voice low, urgent. "Harrow Manor. Intruders. Hurry." Miss Marple stood by the door listening. The manor was quiet, but she felt Giles and his partner out there, searching. The police would come, but not fast enough. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a trap for a thief had caught a liar instead. This was bigger, but the rules held. Set. The bait? Watch the guilty move. Beatrice hung up, her eyes wide. "They're coming. What now?" "We wait," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but her mind racing, "and we watch." Giles slipped, but he's not done. The amulet's still hidden, and he knows it. They stayed in the study, the door locked, the minutes crawling. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to Edward. Giles's desperation meant Edward was a threat alive, maybe, but hidden. The cellar, Sophie's door, the crates, they were the next. Once the police arrived, a distant crash broke the silence glass, maybe from the chapel. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Giles and his partner were moving, maybe fleeing. The trap had flushed them out, but the amulet was gone, and so was Giles. She'd lost this round, but the game wasn't over. Edward was out there, and she'd find him no matter how dark the path. Chapter 8. The Truth Unravels. Miss Jane Marple stood in the study at Harrow Manor, the night heavy around her. The crash from the chapel still echoed in her mind, a sharp reminder that Giles and his mysterious partner were on the move.
Our trap
Had work spreading the rumor of the ruby amulet's discovery had flushed them out, but it had turned dangerous. With her barely escaping their pursuit, now, with Beatrice by her side and the police on their way, she felt the web of secrets tightening. Edward's fate was close, and she was determined to pull the truth free. The study was dim, lit by a single lamp. Beatrice's face was pale, her hands clasped tight. "Jane, are you all right?" she asked, her voice shaking. "They could have hurt you." "I'm fine," Miss Marple said, her tone calm but her blue eyes sharp. Giles and his friend showed their hand. "Progress." She stood by the door, listening for footsteps, her small figure steady despite the danger. In St. Mary Mead, she'd learned that truth came when lies broke. And Giles's panic was a crack in his mask. Beatrice nodded, but her eyes were wide. "The police will be here soon." "What do we do now?" "Wait," Miss Marple said, "and think Giles wants the amulet, and he's desperate. That means Edward's a threat to him alive, I hope, but hidden. The cellar, Sophie's door, those crates there, the key." Her mind raced, piecing together the clues. The blood-stained scarf, Robert's journal, Sophie's midnight search, Giles's ring. Each was a thread, and they led somewhere dark. A distant siren broke the silence, faint, but growing louder. Miss Marple exhaled, her resolve firm. "They're coming. Let's meet them at the door." She unlocked the study, and they moved through the manor's shadowy halls, the air cold and thick. The front doors loomed, and Beatrice opened them just as two police cars pulled up, their lights flashing across the gravel drive. A tall officer stepped out, his face grim. "Lady Harrow, I'm Inspector Crane. You reported intruders." His voice was brisk, his eyes scanning the manor. "Yes," Beatrice said, her voice steady now. "In the chapel. They're after something, an old family heirloom." Miss Marple saw them. Crane's gaze flicked to Miss Marple, his eyebrows rising at her slight, elderly figure. "You saw them, ma'am? Can you describe them?" Miss Marple nodded, her voice clear. "One was Giles Thornton, a guest here. Tall, dark hair, wearing a silver ring with a cross and loop symbol. The other was a stranger, taller, with a scarf over his face. They were in the chapel, trying to pry open the altar." She kept her tone matter-of-fact, but her eyes locked, with Crane's urging him to listen. Crane scribbled in a notebook. "Right? We'll search the chapel and grounds. Stay here, both of you." He signaled his men, who spread out, some heading to the chapel, others circling the manor. Miss Marple watched, her mind working. Giles and his partner had fled, but they couldn't have gone far. The amulet was still hidden, and they wanted it badly. Beatrice touched her arm. "Jane, what if they're still inside?" "Then we'll find them," Miss Marple said, her smile faint but firm. "But I think they're running. Let's help the police." She turned to Crane, who was barking orders. "Spectre, there's a cellar with crates and a hidden door. Edward might be there. I saw Sophie, his cousin, checking it last night." Crane's eyes narrowed. "A hidden door. Show us." He called to officers, and Miss Marple led them through the manor, her steps quick despite her age. The cellar door was still ajar, its iron hinges cold. She pointed to the crates and the wall where Sophie had unlocked a door. "There," she said. "It's locked now, but something's behind it." Crane examined the wall, his fingers tracing the seam. "Jenkins, get a crowbar," he ordered. An officer returned with tools, and they pried at the door, the wood. Groaning, Miss Marple stood back, her heart pounding but her face calm. The door swung open, revealing a narrow room, damp and dark. The officer's flashlights swept inside. And a gasp escaped Beatrice. Edward lay on the floor, bound with rope, his face pale but alive. "Edward!" Beatrice cried, rushing forward. Crane held her back, letting an officer check him. "He's breathing," the officer said, cutting the ropes. "Weak, but alive." Edward stirred, his eyes fluttering open, confused but alert. Miss Marple's heart lifted, but her mind stayed sharp. Edward was alive, but the danger wasn't over. "Inspector, those crates," she said, pointing. "They're marked with symbols like Giles's ring. Check them." Crane nodded, and his men opened a crate, revealing artifacts, statues, jewels, old coins, stolen goods. Crane muttered, "Looks like a smuggling operation." He turned. To Miss Marple, his respect clear. "If you've got a sharp eye, ma'am, we'll take it from here." Beatrice knelt by Edward, tears in her eyes. "Jane, you found him," she whispered. "Thank you." Miss Marple smiled, but her thoughts were on Giles. He'd fled, but he wasn't gone. She needed to know how it all connected: the amulet, the smuggling, Edward's kidnapping, Spectre. She said Giles and his partner are still out there. They wanted the amulet, but these crates suggest something bigger. Crane nodded. "We'll track them. You've given us a start." He radioed his team, ordering a search of the grounds and nearby roads. Edward was carried upstairs, weak, but coherent, and Miss Marple followed, her mind piecing the puzzle together. In the drawing room, Edward sat wrapped in a blanket, sipping water. Clara was there, sobbing, her arms around him. Sophie stood by the window, her face pale, her sketchbook gone. Beatrice hovered, her relief mixed with fear. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her eyes moving from face to face. The truth was close, but she needed Edward's story. "Edward," she said gently, "can you tell us what happened? Why were you in the cellar?" He looked up, his voice hoarse. "I was looking into the amulet like Dad did. Found his journal, learned it was real, hidden in the chapel. I told Sophie, but no one else. Then I saw Giles with a man in the village tall, with a scarf. They were talking about artifacts, big money. I followed them, heard enough to know they were smuggling, using the manor as a base. They caught me, locked me in the cellar to keep me quiet." Miss Marple nodded, her mind slotting pieces into place. "And the amulet? Did you find it?" Edward shook his head. "I got close, found a loose stone in the chapel, but they grabbed me before I could check. They thought I knew where it was, kept asking, but I didn't tell them anything." Sob broke the silence. "Why didn't you tell me, Edward?" "Could have helped." Edward's face softened. "I didn't want to scare you, ma'am. You were already so worried." Miss Marple's gaze flicked to Sophie. "And you, Sophie, you were in the cellar last night looking for Edward." Sophie's eyes widened, then dropped. Yes, she admitted, her voice low. He told me about the amulet, said he was close. When he vanished, I thought he was in trouble. I found Dad's old keys, checked the cellar. I didn't know he was there until now. Her voice broke, and she looked away. Miss Marple believed her Sophie's fear was real, her love for Edward clear. But her secrecy had complicated things. She turned to Crane, who was listening, his notebook out. Inspector Giles and his partner are the key. They're smuggling artifacts and the amulets their prize. Edward was a threat, so they hid. Him, Crane nodded. We've got men searching. Thornton's car is gone, but we'll find him. He paused, looking at Miss Marple. You've got a knack for this, ma'am? Ever think of joining the force? She chuckled, her smile serene. I'm happy in my village, Inspector, but I notice things. Her tone was light, but her mind was still working, tying loose ends. It's a scarf staged to scare Clara, probably by Giles to keep the family off balance. Sophie's drawings maps of the cellar, her way of searching without speaking. Of a bigger scheme, one Giles couldn't run alone. Beatrice spoke, her voice firm. What about the amulet? Is it still in the chapel? Miss Marple tilted her head. Maybe. Edward was close, but we need to check. Inspector, can your men look? Crane nodded, sending an officer to the chapel. Miss Marple stayed in the drawing room, watching the family. Clara clung to Edward, her relief raw. Sophie sat quietly, her hands folded, her guilt heavy. Beatrice stood by the fire, her strength returning. The manor felt lighter now, its shadows thinner, but Giles was still. Out there, a loose thread. An hour later, Crane returned, his face grim. No amulet in the chapel, but we found a loose stone, like Edward said. Looks like someone checked it recently. Fresh scratches? Thornton, maybe? We've got roadblocks up, and we're searching the village. Miss Marple nodded, her mind clear. Giles had fled, but he'd left clues of crates. The cellar, his panic. The amulet was still hidden, its curse a lure for greed. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a stolen ring had led to a confession. This was bigger, but the pattern held. Liars ran, but truth caught up. Edward spoke, his voice stronger. Miss Marple, how did you know where to look? She smiled, her eyes warm. I listen, Edward. People talk even when they don't mean to. Your journal, Sophie's drawings, Giles's lies, they told me where to go. Her voice was gentle, but her words carried weight, and Edward nodded, grateful. The police stayed, searching the manor and grounds. Miss Marple sat with Beatrice, her mind still turning. Giles's partner, the stranger with the scarf, was the missing piece. Who was he? A buyer? A boss? Or something else? The crates suggested. A network, and the manor was just one stop. She'd tell Crane her thoughts, but her work here was nearly done. Edward was safe, the smuggling exposed, the amulet still hidden. As dawn broke. The manor felt different, still heavy but less dark. Miss Marple stood by her window, the moors gray but calm. The truth had unraveled, but not fully. Giles was out there, and the amulet's shadow lingered. She'd stay a little longer, tie the last knots, and then return to St. Mary Mead, where her knitting waited. For now, she'd watch, her quiet strength a match for any darkness. Chapter 9. The final confrontation. Miss Jane Marple stood in the drawing room of Harrow Manor. The morning light paled through the tall windows. The air was tense, the manor quieter now that Edward was safe, found bound but alive in the cellar. Yet the danger wasn't gone. Giles Thornton and his mysterious partner, the scarf-wearing stranger, had fled after Miss Marple's trap exposed their hunt for the ruby amulet. The police were searching, but she knew the truth wasn't fully unraveled. Today she'd chase the last threads, determined to end this dark case. She wore her gray dress and blue cardigan, her white hair pinned neatly. Her mirror had shown. A slight elderly woman, unassuming but with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. In St. Mary Mead, She'd learned that evil left tracks, nervous glances, lies that didn't match. Harrow Manor was grander, but the rules held. Giles was running, but he'd slip and she'd be there. Beatrice sat by the fire, her face weary but strong. Edward was upstairs, resting with Clara at his side. Sophie lingered near the window, her sketchbook closed, her eyes guilty but relieved. Inspector Crane had left men to guard the manor while others hunted Giles. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her hands folded, her mind racing. The amulet was still hidden, the smuggling ring exposed, but Giles and his partner were loose. And they were desperate, Jane, Beatrice said, her voice low. What now? Edward's safe, but those men, they're still out there. Miss Marple nodded, her smile calm, but her gaze firm. We've pulled the web apart, Beatrice, but the spiders are running. Giles and his friend want the amulet, and they won't stop. The police are close, but we need to help them finish it. Her voice was gentle, but her words carried weight. Crane entered, his face grim. Miss Marple, we've got a lead. Thornton's car was spotted near an old warehouse in Greystone, abandoned. We're heading there now. Want to come? His tone was respectful. He'd seen her knack for spotting truth. Miss Marple hesitated. She was no young detective, and warehouses were dangerous. But her trap had started this, and she needed to see it through. Yes, she said, standing. But I'll stay out of the way. Her smile was serene, but her heart was steady. Ready? Beatrice grabbed her hand. Jane, be careful. You've done so much already. I always am, Miss Marple said, patting her hand. She fetched her coat and hat, the sensible one with a single feather, and followed Crane to the police car. The drive to Greystone was quiet, the moors gray under a heavy sky. She thought of the clues. Giles's ring matching the stranger's, the crates of stolen artifacts, Sophie's drawings of locked doors, the scarf meant to scare. They pointed to a smuggling ring with the amulet as its prize. Giles was a cog, but who was the stranger? The warehouse stood at the edge of Greystone, a crumbling brick building with broken windows and a rusted roof. Police cars surrounded it, officers moving quietly, their faces tense. Crane parked, turning to Miss Marple. Stay here, ma'am, until we clear it. You've got sharp eyes. Watch for anything odd. She nodded, her small figure tucked in the car's back seat. Through the window, she saw officers creep toward the warehouse, guns drawn. The air was thick, like before a storm. Her mind worked, piecing the last bits together. Edward had uncovered the smuggling, and Giles had silenced him. But the stranger was the key, someone with power, maybe money. Driving the scheme, a shadow moved near the warehouse's side door. Giles, his dark coat clear in the dim light. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but she stayed still, her eyes locked on him. He glanced around, then slipped inside, a bag slung over his shoulder. She leaned forward, whispering to the officer in the front seat. Giles just went in. Side door, tell Crane. The officer radioed it, and Crane's voice crackled back. Good spot. We're moving in. Stay put, ma'am. Miss Marple nodded, but her mind was in the warehouse, imagining Giles's panic, his partner's anger. They were cornered, and cornered men made mistakes. Minutes passed, slow and heavy. Then shouts broke the silence, followed by a crash glass, maybe, or wood. Officers surged toward the warehouse, and Miss Marple's breath caught. She shouldn't go, but her feet moved, her small figure slipping from the car. She stayed at the edge, near a stack of crates, her eyes scanning. Crane would scold her, but she needed to see, to know. The warehouse doors burst open, and Giles stumbled out, an officer tackling him to the ground. Don't move. The officer shouted, cuffing him. Giles cursed, his face pale, his ring glinting. As he struggled, Miss Marple watched, her heart steady. One spider caught, but where was the other? Crane emerged, dragging a second man, the stranger, his scarf gone, revealing a sharp face with a scar on his cheek. He was tall, his dark coat torn, his eyes wild but cold. You've got nothing, he spat, but his voice shook. Crane cuffed him, his face hard. Miss Marple stepped closer, her voice soft but clear. Inspector asked them about the amulet. They think it's still in the manor. Her words were a probe, and she saw Giles's head snap up, his eyes narrowing. Crane raised an eyebrow but nodded. Thornton, who's this? He jerked a thumb at the stranger. And what's this amulet you're after? Giles's jaw tightened, but the stranger laughed, a harsh sound. Tell them, Thornton, you're done. His voice was sharp, like a blade. Giles slumped, his fight gone. It's Marcus Vane, he said, his voice low. Archaeologist disgraced, runs the smuggling ring. I got caught up, owed him money. The amulet was my way out, worth a fortune on the black market. Vane's eyes flashed, but he said nothing, his silence heavy. Miss Marple watched her mind slotting pieces into place. Vane was the brain, Giles the muscle. They'd used the manor as a hub, hiding artifacts in the cellar, chasing the amulet's legend. Edward had stumbled onto their scheme, and they'd locked him away to keep him quiet. Crane turned to Miss Marple, his respect clear. Anything else, ma'am? She tilted her head, her voice gentle. Ask Mr. Vane about the scarf. The blood was. It meant to scare Clara or cover their tracks. Vane's face twitched, but he smirked. Clever old lady, aren't you? The scarf was Giles's idea. Keep the family panicked, off our trail. Blood was fake, from a butcher. Worked, didn't it? Oh. His tone was mocking, but his eyes were wary. Miss Marple smiled unruffled. Not quite, Mr. Vane. Panic makes people notice things. Her words were soft, but they stung. And Vane's smirk faded. Crane's radio crackled. More officers, reporting the warehouse secure. We found more crates inside, an officer said, joining them. Artifacts, like in the manor. This is big. Miss Marple nodded, her mind clear. The smuggling ring was cracked, Giles and Vane caught. But the amulet was still hidden, its curse a shadow. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a stolen necklace had led to a confession in a barn. This was darker, but the pattern held. Greed tripped over truth. Crane turned to her, his notebook out. Miss Marple, you've got a gift. How'd you know? To watch the seller set that trap? She smiled, her eyes warm. I listen, Inspector. People leave clues, drawings, lies, things they don't say. The manor told me where to look. Her voice was gentle, but her words carried weight, and Crane nodded. Impressed. The officers loaded Giles and Vane into a police car, their faces grim. Miss Marple watched, her heart lighter, but her mind still turning. Edward was safe, the smuggling exposed, but the amulet lingered, its legend unfinished. She'd tell Beatrice to lock the chapel, keep searching. But her work was nearly done. Back at the manor, the family gathered in the drawing room. Edward was stronger, sitting up, his face pale but grateful. Clara clung to his hand, her tears gone. Sophie stood by the fire, her guilt softened by relief. Beatrice hugged Miss Marple, her voice thick. Jane, you saved him. How can we thank you? Miss Marple patted her hand, her smile serene. No need, dear. I'm glad he's safe. She glanced at Edward, her voice gentle. You were brave, Edward, but curious boys need to share their secrets. He nodded, his eyes meeting hers. I will, Miss Marple. I thought I could handle it alone. Sophie spoke, her voice soft. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Miss Marple. I was scared, but I was looking for him, I swear. I know, Miss Marple said, her tone kind. Your drawings helped in their way. She didn't mention the cellar door. The midnight search. Sophie's heart was true. And that was enough. Crane joined them, his face tired but satisfied. Thornton and Vane are in custody. They're talking. Vane's the head, been smuggling for years. The manor was a drop point, and the amulet was their big score. We'll keep searching for it, but this ring's done. Miss Marple nodded, her mind at ease. The manor's shadows were thinner now, its secrets bared. She thought of the journal, Robert's fear, the curse's grip on the family. The amulet was real, but its power was greed, not magic. She'd leave it to the police, her part played as evening fell. She sat with Beatrice, the fire warm. The manor felt different, still heavy, but alive, like it could breathe again. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to St. Mary Mead, her quiet parlor, her knitting. She'd return soon, but this case, her darkest, would linger. She'd faced lies, danger, and a family's pain, and brought light to it all. "Jane," Beatrice said, her voice soft, "you're a wonder. Will you stay a bit longer?" "A day or two," Miss Marple said, her smile faint, just to be sure. Her eyes twinkled, but her mind was already tying the last knots, ready for whatever shadows remained. Chapter 10. Peace restored. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing room of Harrow Manor. The afternoon light soft through the tall windows. The manor was quieter now, its heavy air lifted since Edward's rescue and the capture of Giles Thornton and Marcus Fane. The smuggling ring was broken, the ruby amulet's shadow fading, but the family still carried scars. Miss Marple's work was nearly done, yet she lingered, tying the last threads of her darkest case before returning to St. Mary Mead. She wore her gray dress and blue cardigan, her white hair pinned neatly, her small figure blended with the room's faded elegance, but her blue eyes were sharp, catching every glance, every pause. In her village, she'd learned that peace came after truth, but it needed care to settle. The Harrows were healing, and she'd help them find their way. Beatrice sat across from her, her face tired but warm, a cup of tea in her hands. Edward was upstairs, recovering, his strength returning. Clara hovered near him, her fear easing into relief. Sophie sketched by the window, her pencil moving gently, her dark drawings replaced by softer lines. The manor felt alive again, its stone walls less grim. But Miss Marple knew old houses held memories, and this one would never forget. "Jane," Beatrice said, her voice soft, "you've given us back our family. Edward's safe. Those men are gone. How can we ever repay you?" Miss Marple smiled, her hands folded. "No need, dear. Seeing Edward home is enough." Her tone was gentle, but her mind was still working, checking for loose ends. The amulet was still hidden, its curse a lure for greed. Giles and Vane were in custody, their smuggling ring exposed, but the manor's secrets needed closing. Edward came downstairs, his steps slow but steady. Clara followed, her hand on his arm, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Miss Marple," Edward said, sitting near her, "right? I owe you everything. If you hadn't come," his voice trailed off, and he shook his head, his young face marked by the ordeal. "You were brave," Miss Marple said, her smile warm. "But next time, share your secrets. Curious minds need friends." Her words were kind, but they carried a lesson, and Edward nodded, his eyes meeting hers. Clara's voice trembled. "I was so scared, Jane. That scarf, the blood, I thought. He was gone forever." She wiped her eyes, and Miss Marple patted her hand. "It was a cruel trick," Miss Marple said, "meant to frighten you. But you're stronger than you know, Clara." Her voice was gentle, lifting Clara's spirits. And she saw a spark of resolve in the woman's face. Sophie looked up from her sketch, her voice quiet. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Miss Marple. I thought I could find him myself with those drawings. I was wrong." Her guilt was clear, but her eyes were honest. "Your heart was right," Miss Marple said, her tone soft. "Your drawings helped, Sophie. They showed me the cellar, the door. Trust yourself, but trust others too." She smiled, and Sophie's shoulders relaxed, her pencil moving again. Beatrice set her cup down, her face serious. "Jane, what about the amulet? Still out there, somewhere in the manor? Should we look for it?" Miss Marple tilted her head, her mind sharp. The amulet was real. Robert's journal proved it, hidden in the chapel or crypt. But its curse was greed, not magic, drawing men like Vane to ruin. "I'd leave it be for now," she said. "But if you must find it, give it to a museum. Let it be history, not trouble." Her voice was calm, but her words were firm, and Beatrice nodded, her jaw set. "I will," Beatrice said. "No more secrets in this house. I'll have the chapel searched properly and donate whatever we find. The Harrows are done with curses." Her voice was strong, and Miss Marple saw the weight lift from her friend's shoulders. The door opened, and Inspector Crane stepped in, his face tired but satisfied. "Lady Harrow, Miss Marple," he said, nodding. "Thornton and Vane are talking. Vane's the mastermind been smuggling artifacts across Europe, using old estates like this one as hubs. The amulet was his obsession, worth millions to the right buyer. Thornton was in deep owed Vane debts. Tor got too close, so they hid him." Miss Marple nodded, her mind slotting the last pieces. "And the scarf?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. Crane's lips twitched, a hint of a smile. "Vane's idea, executed by Thornton. Fake blood to keep Clara panicked and the family distracted. Worked until you showed up, ma'am." His respect was clear, and Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "People talk, Inspector," she said, "even when they don't mean to." Her tone was light, but her words carried the weight of her method, watching, listening, noticing the small things that cracked big lies. Crane turned to Beatrice. "We're searching the manor again, focusing on the chapel. If that amulet's here, we'll find it. The smuggling rings done Vane's contacts are rolling over, scared of jail." He paused, looking at Miss Marple. "You ever think of police work, ma'am? You'd run circles around my men." She chuckled, her smile serene. "I'm happy in St. Mary Mead, Inspector. My knitting keeps me busy." Her voice was warm, but her mind was still tying knots, ensuring no thread was loose. Crane left, and the family sat together, the fire crackling. Edward spoke, his voice stronger. "Miss Marple, how did you know?" "The cellar, the trap hall of it." She leaned back, her hands folded. "I watch, Edward. People leave clues in their words, their eyes, their silences. Your father's journal told me the amulet was real. Sophie's drawings pointed to the cellar. Giles's ring matched a stranger's, and his lies didn't hold. Small things, but they add up." Her voice was gentle, like she was explaining a recipe. But her words wove the case's heart. Edward nodded, his gratitude clear. "You're like a detective, but quieter." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Quiet works, dear. It lets you hear what others miss." Her words were soft, but they landed, and the family smiled, their tension easing. Beatrice stood, her voice firm. "Jane, stay a few days. Rest, enjoy the manor without its shadows. You've earned it." "I'll stay tomorrow," Miss Marple said. "But St. Mary Mead calls. My roses need me." Her tone was light, but her heart was ready to return too. Her parlor, her knitting, her simple life where small puzzles waited. That evening, the manor felt different, warmer, its stone walls less heavy. Dinner was simple, the family talking, even laughing, as Edward shared stories of his childhood. Clara's smile was real, Sophie's sketches brighter, Beatrice's strength a beacon. Miss Marple watched, her heart full. She'd faced darkness. Here greed lies. Furren brought light, not with force, but with quiet, steady truth. After dinner, she walked the grounds, the moors stretching wide under a clearing sky. The manor loomed behind her, its towers sharp, but no longer grim. She thought of the amulet, still hidden, its curse broken by choice Beatrice's vow to let it rest in a museum. In St. Mary Mead, a lost brooch had taught her that greed unraveled families, but truth mended them. This was bigger, but the lesson held. Back in her room, she packed her small suitcase, folding her gray dress, her blue cardigan, her sensible hat. The scarf journal and Tom's sketch were gone, given to Crane as evidence. She sat by the window, the night calm, and thought of the case. Giles's charm, Vane's cold ambition, Edward's bravery, Sophie's guilt. They were human, flawed. And her gift was seeing them clearly. She'd faced her darkest case, not with a gun, but with her mind, her heart, her unyielding resolve. The next day, she joined the family for breakfast, the table lively with talk. Edward was stronger, planning to help Beatrice with the estate. Clara spoke of visiting London, her fear replaced by hope. Sophie showed Miss Marple a new sketch a garden, bright with flowers, no locked doors. Beatrice announced the chapel. Search would start tomorrow with experts, not treasure hunters. The manor was healing, its shadows fading. Crane stopped by, updating them. Vanes confessed to more names places. The ring's done, thanks to you, Miss Marple. We're still looking for the amulet, but it's not urgent. You've given us enough. She nodded, her smile serene. Keep looking, Inspector. Old houses hide things well. Her voice was light, but her eyes held a spark. Knowing the amulet's truth was safe for now, Beatrice drove her to the Greystone station. The car rolling past moors and stone walls. Jane, she said, her voice thick, you're always welcome. Here, you've changed us. Miss Marple patted her hand, her smile warm. You changed yourselves, dear. I just helped you see. Her words were soft, but they carried the case's heart truth. Not her, had saved them at the station. The noon train waited, its whistle sharp. Miss Marple boarded, her suitcase light, her heart full. The carriage smelled of polish and coal, and she found a window seat, watching Greystone fade its church, its pub, its secrets. The manor was behind her, its darkness lifted, its family whole. She thought of St. Mary Mead, her quiet village where gossip held truth, where her knitting waited by the fire. This case had been her darkest lie's greed, a boy's life at stake, but she'd faced it, her quiet strength stronger than any shadow. The train rattled through hills, the landscape soft and green, and she smiled, faint but sure. Human nature was messy, but it left clues, and she'd always find them, thread by thread. Back home, she'd sit by her window, her pink shawl half finished, and watch the village move Mrs. Price's gossip, young Tom's mischief, the vicar's sermons. Small puzzles, but they kept her sharp. Harrow Manor had tested her, but it had proven her, too. She leaned back, the train's rhythm steady, her mind at peace. The world was full of secrets, but none could hide from her.